In a lot of cases, it's important to be able to pass in parameters to a destination when we are navigating to it. And in Jetpack Compose, we need to know how to do it. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can pass in parameters to a destination when you are navigating to that destination. As you can see, I have created an initial application that contains a selection screen where I can select several parameters or enter some parameter, and then by pressing the button I can go to another screen to which I will pass in some parameters. So you need to download the source code for this initial application from the resources of this lecture, and then you can watch the video and complete it as you go, or you can complete it whenever you feel like it and you feel comfortable. So as you can see, I have a selection screen. This is called the selection screen, which is referred to by this composable that I have inside my nav host. This is my first and only destination that I have in my nav host. And the selection screen composable in turn contains one column, one big column, and two other columns, the first column and the second column, where the user can make their selections. Here I have two parameters to select: the image that I need to select and its scale to be shown in the other screen to which I will go. And for the second part of the screen, I have a name to be entered by the user, and then by pressing the Greet Me button, I will go to another screen and a greeting to that name will be displayed. So let's see how it's done. The first thing I'm gonna do is to enter the presentation mode because I want to show the code in a bigger size. So view, appearance, and enter presentation mode like this. And here I have a to do: add root to show image. So I add a root here, composable, I name it show, and as I said, I need to pass in two parameters: the image resource and the scale of the image to be displayed. So this is the way we pass in parameters in Jetpack Compose navigation. You add a slash before the parameter and then curly braces. You put in the name of the parameter there, and if you have other parameters, you add it that way. So the first parameter is image resource I want to pass in, and the second one is scale. And then I have the list of arguments. Sorry, I pressed the end button and the screen just scrolled down. And here the second argument for this function and for this composable is the list of arguments, as you can see from the Android Studio hint. Arguments, list of. Here I use list of because I need to specify the list of arguments, and then nav argument, first the name of the first argument. Let's import nav argument, image resource, the first argument, and then I open its lambda where I can specify the characteristics of that argument. For example, its argument type. So its type is image resource is integer, so I use nav type dot int type. Let's import nav type. So nav argument, as you can see, it has two parameters, name and argument builder. I used both of them. Let's import nav argument. If it's not already imported, then nav argument for the second argument, which we know is scale, and scale, we know that is a float. So type, nav type, float type, and then we have a last parameter for our composable, where we can get the parameters and then use them for navigation. Here we are receiving a nav back stack entry that contains our arguments, and then we can extract our arguments from that nav back stack entry and pass to our destination composables, which are show screen and greeting screen. So I named the parameter that is passed to the lambda as backstack entry, and then I use them for the call. First I get the image resource, val image, I name it for short, and then and then backstack entry dot arguments, and then I use the safety operator here from Kotlin, and then extract this image resource, get float, get integer. Because it is integer, I use get int, and the name of the parameter is image resource. And the next one is val scale, I name it scale, and I extract it from backstack entry dot arguments, get float this time, and I get scale, and then I call my destination composable, which is show screen, to which I pass in image resource as well as the scale. Alright, because the types returned by getInt and getFloat can be null, I need to do something about it when I am passing it to show screen. So I say if image is not null and scale is not null, like this. All right. After that, I'm gonna create the next composable, the next destination for the second part of the screen. And this time I'm using another form of passing parameters in compose navigation, and that's called optional argument passing or optional arguments. Here I'm passing an optional argument that can be skipped by the user when they are navigating to that destination. So with optional arguments, we don't have to specify the argument when we are going to a destination. It's optional, as its name suggests. So I name the argument here. My argument is called, I call it name, and name, and then I specify its argument type. Because it is string, you can skip it, you can skip specifying the argument type, because by default arguments in compose navigation are considered string. So arguments, list of arguments, nav argument, the name of my argument is name, its type is string, and one important thing to be careful about here and to focus on is that you need to specify the default value of that parameter. Because it is optional, we must specify the default value, or at least set the nullable parameter to true. So I type default value, I specify the default value for this composable and for this destination. And for example, I use John Doe as the default value. And then in the final part, or in the lambda of my composable, I pass in backstack entry to it. Backstack entry. And I go to greeting screen with the parameter extracted. So for name, I use backstack entry dot arguments and get string. Name, all right, and because this also might return a string that is nullable, we need to do something about it. We need to make the parameter passed to greeting screen as nullable, or we need to convert this to string. But because we have specified the default value of John Doe for this parameter, we don't worry about passing null to our greeting screen. So now that we are done with our composables, we remove the to-dos and we check our two composables show screen. As you can see, it will show the image with the given scale, and we also have our greeting screen that will show a greeting for the past name. Alright, let's run our application. Oh no, it's not working yet. We have the buttons that need to be triggered and need to do something. For the first button that I have in the upper part of the screen, when the button is clicked, I need to use the nav controller to go to that destination. So I use nav controller and then navigate to show, and then I pass in the parameters that I have. The image resource, as you can see, the image resource is the image that is currently selected image. It is the index of the selected image currently. As you can see, images is a list of image resources, 3 image resources, and selected image is its index. So I pass in selected image as image resource. Actually, I need to pass in images with the index of image that is selected. Images like this. And then the next parameter is scale. So I specify it as well. We are done with the first part. So scale. The scale parameter here is specified with the variable of scale. I have created a variable, a state variable called scale, called slide. It is called slide, and I pass in slide. This slide parameter will specify the amount of scale that I need to perform on the previewed image. So I send slide. So we are done with the first part, with the upper part. And then for the lower part of the screen, for the button that I have there, I send the entered name. So as you can see, the name is entered as the variable, the state variable of name. So I need to send that to my destination. Again, I have nav controller sent to this composable. As you can see, I have nav controller sent to me as a parameter to selection screen. So I have access to it, and then in the handler of this button, I say navigate to greeting screen. What did I call that route? Let's call it greet. Let's remove this to do for the first button, and then here for the second button I'm navigating to the greet destination. with this parameter. The parameter that I'm passing is called name, and its value is name. Alright, let's run our application. Run. Alright, I don't have access to images here. Why? Images. Button. Text. Images. Images is inside the row, and the button doesn't have access to it. So I hoist the images variable. I move it upper in the tree. I move it inside the column, and now it should access it. Now my button should be able to access it. And selected image. Yes, I need to move selected image and hoist it as well, like this, and then run it again. Alright, my application is running. I select my desired scale and the image that I want, for example this apple, and I want it to be previewed in the target destination by clicking the show image. There we go. You can see that I have a preview of the selected image in the target screen. I go back, I select another image. This image is selected by default, the pineapple. So I select a scale and then press show image. There we go. So we were able to pass into parameters with the first form of parameter passing, and you saw that usage here. Now what about the second part? The second part where I can send my name. Welcome Mehdi. So what happens if I don't specify anything here? Welcome John Doe. The reason is that the default name is used here. If you don't specify a parameter, if you don't specify a value for your optional parameter in Jetpack Compose navigation, it will use the default value. And here we are using the default value of John Doe because we know that we have specified that value as the default name to be displayed and to be passed to our destination. As you can see, here we get its value, and because it has a default value, it is receiving the default value and displaying it when we don't provide any value here. Alright. So we talked about two methods of passing parameters to our destinations in Jetpack Compose. The next question that we need to tackle, and we might tackle, is it possible to combine these two types of parameter passing? Am I able to pass in an optional parameter aligned with the first form? the answer is yes. I will be able to pass in an optional parameter when I'm using the first form of parameter passing to my navigation destination. So the only thing that I need to do is just adding a new optional argument to my route. So for example, I want to send a caption to be displayed on top of the image in the preview and in the show screen that I have in my destination. So I specify a name here, a name for my parameter, caption I name it, caption, and then I specify its type. It's very important to specify it here, nav argument, because the navigation system knows the list of your parameters from this block, nav argument. Its name is caption. You can skip its type because by default it considers the type to be string. So I can just skip adding the type for it, and then here we can pass in the caption that the user enters as a new parameter to show screen. So caption, and for its value I send the caption that I have received. Val caption backstack entry. I extract caption from the backstack entry arguments, get string caption, caption. But as I said, optional arguments need to know the default type. You need to specify the default type for them or set their null to true. So I can set its default value to true. I can pass in a default value to it. I need to do it, or I can set its nullability to true. Nullable, true. I can do this, which I'm not interested in. I don't want to work with null, and I don't want to pass in null parameter, so I use a default value. Selected image. I use the default value of selected image to pass, so that I know I will never pass in some null parameter. And because show screen doesn't yet have a parameter called caption, I need to edit the definition of this composable to add it. So I add caption string like this, and now I can send the caption. Caption is nullable, so I call to string to convert it to a string, and in order to use it, because I'm inside the box after the image, I call text, the text composable from material design, and for its value I used caption. And let's specify a style for it. Style material theme dot typography dot I can use caption or let's use h2 and the modifier I use modifier.align to align it in the center of the screen. So alignment dot center like this, and now I will be able to see the result. Let's also add some padding. Let's run the application again. Select the scale, show image, selected image. You can see the caption displayed on top of the image in the center of the screen, but the problem is that we are not yet able to send our desired caption. And for that to work, I need to add a new UI component here to be able to make the user able to enter their desired caption. So I go back to the definition of this part. Inside my first column, before the button for show image, actually, I use an outline text field which has two parameters that are required value and onValue change, and for them I define two state variables, val caption and onCaption change. Let's define them easily using Kotlin destructuring assignment. Caption onCaption change. Remember mutable state of empty string, and now I can use caption as the value and onCaption change as onValue change. As you can see, onCaption change is a lambda that takes in a string and doesn't return anything. It actually is responsible for updating the caption value to new values when it is updated by the user by entering new characters inside it and editing it. OnCaption change. Let's add a label to it. Label text for its label image caption. All right. And when passing the parameter, I need to specify the optional argument. As you can see, the previous time we didn't call with the optional argument because it was optional. We simply skipped it. We didn't pass that argument, but this time I'm gonna pass it. So because it is called caption, I use caption, and for its value I use the caption string that I have defined. Let's run it again. Alright, I select one of these images, this banana for example, with some scale, and then the image caption. I use banana As you can see, I haven't added a padding, so it's good to have a padding for it. I add that as a modifier, padding 8 dip, like this, and also fill max width to fill the whole width that I have available. So I go to my destination by pressing show image. There we go. The banana is shown with the selected scale and with the entered caption. I return back to my previous screen, and as you can see, and as you saw in this video, we had two types of parameter passing: the required parameters or arguments and the optional arguments. For optional arguments, you don't need to specify them because they are optional and they can be skipped. And because navigation system knows that they have a default value, so when you don't specify them, it can use the default values, as it did for our caption parameter in our upper part of the screen. When we didn't specify it, it displayed the default caption of selected image. But when we specify it, we call our root, we go to our root with the selected option, with the selected argument. So we add our optional argument and its value to our root, and we call it, and then it displays it with that argument. It displays that by incorporating that argument in our backstack entry. For the second part, we only had an optional argument. When we didn't specify it, again, it used the default value of John Doe. And you saw a mixture of these two types of parameter passing: the required parameters and the optional argument. So you saw that we can have in a root both required arguments and optional arguments. Let's run it once more with the selected UI changes, with the new UI changes that I applied. I select one of the images, select slide, the desired scale for the image, and then image caption, apple, or my apples, sorry. I press the home button, my apple, and I press the button show image. As you can see, my apple caption is displayed on top of my previewed image. Very nice. This is a combination of passing required parameters and optional parameters to my navigation destination. And for the second part, Mehdi, or because I used it last time, this time I use Udemy. Greet me, welcome Udemy. Or John, welcome John. And if I don't specify it, the value of John Doe is passed in as the default value of this argument. So that's it basically for how you can pass in parameters to your destinations when you are using Jetpack Compose navigation system. So in short, we had two types of parameter passing: the required parameters or arguments and the optional ones. And the important thing about the optional ones is that they need to have a default value, or their nullability needs to be set to true, which I don't recommend because you have to deal with null values. As you saw, I used some default value other than null. So I hope that you liked this video, and I see you in the next one.